Some people become popular in high school, others become feared, but Regina George managed to become something else entirely. She became untouchable. At North Shore High School, Regina George wasn't just another popular student. She was the center of everything. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone watched what she did. And somehow, without ever officially being in charge, Regina controlled the entire social hierarchy. The question is how? Because Regina didn't have any real authority. She wasn't the principal. She wasn't even trying that hard to prove she was powerful. And yet somehow, everyone acted like she was. That's because Regina understood something about people that most people don't notice. Most social groups don't run on rules, they run on approval. People want to feel accepted. They want to feel like they belong. And Regina George positioned herself as the person who decided who belonged and who didn't. If Regina liked you, suddenly things felt different. People noticed you more. Your social status went up. Being associated with Regina meant you were part of something important. But if Regina didn't like you, things could change very quickly. Suddenly, people looked at you differently. Conversations stopped when you walked into a room. And slowly, without Regina ever having to say anything directly, your place in the social hierarchy would begin to fall. That's the kind of influence Regina had. But Regina's power wasn't just about popularity. It was about emotional control. She understood how to keep people close to her while still keeping them insecure. And she did that by constantly shifting between kindness and cruelty. One moment, Regina would compliment someone. She would make them feel special, important, like they were lucky to be part of her circle. But then, just as quickly, she would say something that made them doubt themselves. A small insult, a quiet criticism, something subtle enough that people couldn't always call it out, but strong enough to make them feel insecure. And when people feel insecure, they start chasing approval. Approval that Regina controlled. So instead of questioning Regina's behavior, people worked harder to stay on her good side, even the people closest to her. The plastics. Like Gretchen Wieners and Karen Smith. From the outside, it looked like they were Regina's best friends. But in reality, the relationship was more complicated than that. Karen mostly followed along with whatever was happening. But Gretchen constantly needed Regina's approval. She wanted to stay close to Regina's power. She wanted to stay part of the group. And Regina knew that. She knew exactly how loyal Gretchen would be if she kept her just close enough. Just important enough, but never equal. That's how Regina stayed at the top. She created a system where everyone else was constantly trying to keep their place. And the more people competed for Regina's approval, the stronger her influence became. Before long, Regina George wasn't just popular. She was the person who defined what popularity even meant. She decided what was cool. She decided what people wore. She decided who was respected and who became a target. And because everyone believed Regina had that power, her influence only grew stronger. But systems built on influence are fragile. They only work as long as people believe in them. They only work as long as people believe in them. And eventually, someone entered Regina's world who didn't understand the rules yet. Someone who hadn't grown up inside this social system. Someone who didn't automatically believe in Regina's power. That person was Katie Heron. At first, Katie was just observing, watching how Regina interacted with people, watching how everyone reacted to her, trying to understand why one person seemed to control so much of the school's social life. But the more Katie watched, the more she started to see how Regina's system actually worked. And once someone understands a system like that, they can start to challenge it. Because Regina George's power was never truly absolute. It was built on perception, on the belief that Regina was untouchable. But the moment that belief started to break, her entire empire began to fall apart. And suddenly, Regina George wasn't the most powerful girl in school anymore. She was just another student. And that's the strange thing about social power. It can feel permanent when you're at the top. It can feel like the rules will always stay the same. But most of the time, those rules only exist because everyone quietly agrees to follow them. Regina's entire system depended on one thing: everyone believing that Regina George was the center of the social world. But the moment cracks began to appear in that belief, the entire structure started to shift. People who once admired Regina started questioning her. People who once feared her started realizing that maybe her power wasn't as absolute as it seemed. And when that shift begins, it spreads quickly. Because influence in social groups behaves almost like a chain reaction. The moment one person stops believing in someone's authority, others start wondering why they believed in it in the first place. Suddenly, the person who once seemed untouchable starts looking human, fallible, even ordinary. And that's exactly what happened. Regina George had spent so much time controlling the social game that she never imagined someone else might learn how to play it too. But that's exactly what Katie Heron began to do. At first, Katie only wanted to understand Regina's world. She watched how Regina spoke to people. She noticed how small comments could completely change someone's confidence. She saw how Regina kept control by keeping everyone slightly insecure. But the more Katie learned about Regina's system, the more she realized something surprising. That same system could be turned against Regina herself. Because once you understand the rules of a social hierarchy, you also understand its weaknesses. And Regina's weakness was simple. Her power depended on everyone continuing to believe she deserved it. But when rumors spread, when friendships began to shift, when people stopped automatically treating Regina like the center of everything, her influence slowly started slipping away. The same social dynamics that once lifted her to the top of the hierarchy now started pulling her down. And suddenly, the girl who once controlled the entire school found herself losing control of the very system she created. It's almost ironic. Regina George built her power by shaping how other people saw themselves. But in the end, her power was always tied to how other people saw her. Once that perception changed, everything else followed. And that's why Regina George's story is more than just a high school drama. It's actually a perfect example of how social influence works. The most powerful person in a group isn't always the strongest, or the smartest, or even the most confident. Sometimes, it's simply the person who understands how people think, the person who understands how approval works, how reputation spreads, how quickly a group can turn admiration into fear and fear into rejection. Regina George understood all of those things. For a while, that understanding made her the most powerful person in her world. But in the end, it also showed just how fragile that kind of power can be. Because influence built on control can disappear the moment people stop believing in it. And once that happens, even the most untouchable person can suddenly become ordinary again. But Regina George's mindset wasn't the only interesting one inside the plastics. Because while Regina ruled through power and control, someone else survived by staying close to that power. Someone who constantly tried to keep Regina happy. Someone who believed her entire place in the social hierarchy depended on Regina's approval. And that was Gretchen Wieners. Her mindset is very different from Regina's, but it might actually be far more relatable. Because a lot of people have experienced what it's like to depend on someone else's approval. So next, we're breaking down the Gretchen Wieners mindset and why people like Gretchen stay loyal to someone like Regina even when it hurts them.